Hello, everybody, and welcome to Music Industry Insights Worldwide. And today I've got the awesome Grace with us. Hi, Grace, how are you? Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself, where you're from, and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Grace and I'm from Liverpool and I am a musician and sort of gender equality activist whose work sort of spans the UK and Europe at this stage. And I'm the founder of GENIE, which is an online database of over 380 projects at this point across 26 countries, supporting with gender equality in music.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Grace. And do you want to tell us how long you've been in the industry and how you got to this stage?
Yeah, so I've been playing drums since I was about seven, and I think that sort of radicalized me because drums wasn't seen as a particularly feminine instrument, and then it was always sort of pointed out. It was like, oh, so you're a girl who plays the drums, and I think I really noticed my gender when I sort of went to university, and I was one of the only women doing an instrument instead of singing and vocals at university, and that sort of radicalized me to understand why that might be the case.
Right.
And then I sort of went on to study an MA in music industry, and I'm currently studying for a PhD, looking at gender equality in music as well. So I've sort of gone, I'm in the industry still as a musician and activist, but I'm also trying to use research now to sort of support the work that I'm trying to do within the industry as well.
And I think that's really, really important because without the research, we don't have the data, do we? And the data actually drives change. So that's really, really important.
Exactly, yeah.
And how have you found that actually? And how have you found the research and what have you come up with so far?
So I'm still very early on in the research. So it's been more getting my head around what my subject is, because even when you start a PhD and you've got a concept, an idea, it changes so quickly. And every week you learn something new that you go, oh, I
Yeah.
don't know if I can go down this route, because my whole research topic is regional gender inequality in music. So where a woman is based and how it affects her career progression in music, because I can't really find any scholars at this stage who have sort of looked at this as a key barrier to participation, because I feel like we're starting to talk about class a lot more, but we're
Yeah.
not talking about where a person is based. And
No.
then bringing gender on top of that, I think sort of compounds it to be an even bigger issue as well.
And I think that intersectional approach is really, really important. I was born to two disadvantaged parents, and I come from a disadvantaged background. I do find that money, and obviously moving from Oxford to London, even those
Mm,
changes have a massive impact on what you can achieve and how far you can go. So,
definitely.
impacted women in the music industry and the sort of success we can achieve. Have you found any of those issues from your research, or what have you found from your research that's kind of impacts or implies that there are some issues?
So I think it's definitely at this stage you can see that there's sort of glass ceiling of
Yeah.
women feeling they can only get so far in a city. And if they can't find the role that they need, they either leave or they sort of create a role for themselves. There's
Okay.
sort of two routes that people go down. So I'm probably in the latter of I've created my own sort of role, which
Yeah.
is a bit of a hybrid role of everything. So when people ask me what I do, I'm like, how much time have you got? Because I do a million things. Whereas some
Right.
people make the choice to go, I'm going to move to the center of the industry where there's more access to opportunity. It's
Yeah.
like there's still that discrimination aspect, but there's technically more chance for you to actually end up in maybe the role you would like to do, because we're still not in the situation where hybrid is has been accepted in the industry in the way that I wish it would be, because obviously there's some roles in the industry that you need to be based in certain places to do, but I
Yeah.
just wish that there would be more access for people to be based somewhere like Liverpool, but then also have a London based role and sort of flip between the two, because I think that's the way the industry it will benefit from those perspectives.
Definitely. I definitely think that's a great point that you make. And actually looking at things and saying that, a lot of it is centered in London. However, there's a lot of talent that's not in London that can't always
Exactly.
access London. So how have you found that, like being in Liverpool? Because I've got some strong family ties in Liverpool, as you know already. And I love Liverpool so much. And Liverpool's been a hub of cultural change and music influence. How do you find it up in Liverpool at the moment?
So I think it's definitely a sector that it really punches above its weight as a place, because it's quite small. It's a relatively small place, but there is a really robust industry here, which is really good. And obviously, silly things like the cost of living is a lot cheaper here. So I'm able to sort of do the work that I want to do and be able to afford to live here.
Yeah,
So there's sort of that aspect of it, but there's definitely the thing I noticed in Liverpool is the gender divide, because
yeah,
Liverpool traditionally, the music that's come out of Liverpool has been very male orientated, very male heavy in every respect,
yeah.
from the people making the music to the people behind the scenes. And when you're in a smaller scene, I think that's compounded even further, that there's less access to opportunity, and men are hiring from within their own circles and perpetuating that. And a
Yeah.
lot of the time, I don't think it's a deliberate thing of excluding women, but it's more the deliberate tactic of including men. If that makes sense, they're including the people who look and sound like them, and women struggle to sort of enter those spaces still. I think,
So
especially quite a small industry.
is what you would say, right? So people that look like you, that are like you, will put you in because you're like us, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
because it's comfortable, isn't it? And it's like you understand it and you know how to work with it. Whereas someone who brings maybe a different perspective, or a person who doesn't look like you or act like you, and you
Yeah,
don't know how to interact with them in the same way, especially because women often become the token woman in
yeah,
many organizations, depending on the role they do. So I
yeah,
think for a lot of women now, they sort of carve their own sort of route. They create their own networks and stuff, which excludes them further, but
yeah,
includes them in their own networks, which it's like a double-edged sword in a way.
definitely. And do you find that financial backing and kind of that kind of thing and sponsorships is now starting to improve for underrepresented groups? Or do you think it's still really the same as what it was?
I think it's definitely getting better, because you've got like PRS Foundation are doing like the accelerator funds, which are for region specific, which is really good because they clearly identified that not enough people from regions were applying and being successful for funding. So then they've then put in place a really good sort of what's it called, like a pot of funding essentially to support that. So I think that's really good, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done for like entrepreneurship in creative industries, because it feels like it's sort of a black hole, because there's loads of really good funding for musicians now, but say if you want to start your own record label and stuff, which can be incredibly difficult and financially not viable for a lot of people, there's not really that pot of money to sort of support. It's either you raise like venture capital to do these things, which who's going to be able to do that mostly. And there's also interesting research I'm looking at, which women struggle to get any venture capital or any sort of investment in business, and if they do, it's in health and beauty,
Okay.
which is very interesting. It's like if women want to start a business, statistically they're more likely to get funded if they're in the health and beauty space than if they go into any other sort of
So it's
demographic.
very typical, isn't it?
Yeah,
Basically, breaking
it's
that.
very like gender divided. Yeah.
That's really sad to hear, actually. And it's also something that breaks my heart because so many women have so much to bring to the table, in this world. And I think we need to amplify each other's voices and work together and build those allies and allyship, because I think that's extremely important, isn't it, for that success and for that diversity and inclusion to happen. What's your thoughts and feelings on equality, diversity, and inclusion at the moment in the music industry?
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because I feel like we've moved forward as
Mhm.
as a society, but we also seem to move backwards. Like I think, especially for me, it's at the moment the way the trans community is being treated,
Yeah,
not just in the music industry, but in a wider social sense. It's
yeah.
sort of the way we saw gay panic in the 80s.
I
It's
know.
being perpetuated now with the trans community, and I find it absolutely horrific. So I feel like societally we're moving backwards in many respects, but the
I feel
industry,
I feel
yeah,
that.
the industry is meant to be progressive because it's full of creative, quite liberal or outwardly liberal people.
Yes.
So it's sort of that weird double-edged sword at the moment. Like in the US, reproductive rights are getting rolled back, and it's like all of these things matter to the
Yeah.
women who work in the industry as well.
Then.
So I think that's my problem. It's like no matter how much in the industry we seem to all be holding hands and being incredibly liberal and supportive and of causes and stuff, there's sort of that weird thing of like, well, if we're all doing that, but society as a concept is moving backwards,
Yeah.
then it's a weird place to be at the moment, I think, especially I know we've just had a change of government here, and I think it'll be interesting to see how that goes as well.
Crossed. Fingers crossed. And do you actually find that obviously being in the creative industries, women are getting more kind of visibility and representation. Do you think that also helps inspiring the next generation of talent to come along and say, I feel part of this, I am part of this societal change, this cultural shift? Because I think music is a massive part of that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's so much easier for you to consider a career in something if you've seen someone else already do it. And I think especially the way the UK education system is it's not like you sit down and they're like, you can be a music lawyer, you can work in PR, you could work in music marketing, you could be a top session musician. those career paths aren't really taught in the way that other career paths are. So I think it's good to see these tangible role models. And I think for women to see other women in those roles, because I think even though we have moved forward as a society, there's a lot of roles we still see as traditionally male. And we
Yes.
still see like traditionally men doing them, like the idea of the music mogul. It's most, you think of a man most of the time and stuff. So I think that visibility thing, it really helps. And I think what I try and do with my work as well, because I do like mentoring and stuff, is trying to help artists of all genders and just sort of give them the advice and show them that you can be in my position and do the work I do and have the knowledge set I have and be a woman, which shouldn't be a radical thing, but
It
in many
is.
respects it still is.
Yeah, and shout out to Menendez Scott. She's the artist manager of Missy Elliott, and she's done such a great job. And she's a music mogul herself, but often not talked about. Most of the female
Yeah.
musicals are never talked about. It's mainly men. What can we do to change that, Grace?
Well, I think for me, it's like the history of music is written by men. That's the first thing that needs to change. Is there needs to be a reconfiguration of that, of how do we include women in these histories. I think Liverpool has this problem. It's like when you think of Liverpool music industry, you think of one band,
Yes.
and you can't really think of many women who have maybe been involved in the scene. So I
Okay.
think from my perspective, that's a big thing that needs to change. And I think for me personally, it's the work around inequalities due to place in the music industry, because no one's really accepting at this point that it is a massive barrier. We talk about class a lot now, but all the research and the reports aren't talking about place as a barrier. And I'm like, to me, that's one of the biggest at this stage in terms of socioeconomic as well, because if
Yeah.
you can't access the resources you need to get into the industry,
And you
it's like
can't.
you don't need a degree to do it. You
Yeah.
need access to resource. That's what you need in this industry.
100% actually. And there's that massive north-south divide. How does that affect Liverpool and the people that are up in the north? Because I'm in England, so I've always been down south, so I've never really experienced that. What is that difference?
Yeah, so I think it's the access to resource thing. I think it's the visibility and also funding, and
Yeah.
even silly things like access to public transport, access to support networks, access to projects like youth funded, council funding, all of these things. It's like Liverpool is quite robust in that respect, but in general, if you look at investment in the north versus the south, there is this big divide, and then
Yes.
that does have an impact on creative and cultural industries, because you've got more access in education, especially in the south, to educational courses through GCSE and A level. There's a more diverse range of options. Like when I did my A levels, there was no access for me to do a music A level, so I had to go to a boys' school
I'm
to
sorry.
do a music tech A level.
No way. No
Which
way.
is, it sounds crazy, but these are the barriers that we put in place from a young age. I
Right.
was fine with it, and the boys were lovely, but it was a really weird situation to be in.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine that. And what kind of
Yeah.
barriers, touching on that actually, what kind of challenges and barriers have you faced accessing and being in the music industry, up north and
Yeah.
being female as well? Tell us more.
I think I've been quite lucky in that respect, because I've sort of managed to carve out my own niche with the things I do, and making gender equality my thing means that I'm constantly talking about the barriers that everyone faces. So I've made that weird niche that, to me, it's more from a young age, the offhand comment. It's like, oh, you're quite good for a girl. Oh, you don't look like a drummer. All of that starts quite early. But I was quite lucky that I went to an all-girls state school,
Yes.
and it was never sort of ingrained in any of us that we couldn't do a thing. And
Yeah.
it was only when I started to mix with men and boys, when I got to sixth form and A level and then university, I realised that there was this gender dynamic at play. Because from the ages of 12 to 16,
You
which is
just
like the formative years, I was never really around boys. So I just never really considered what I did strange.
right.
So I think that was one of the barriers that sort of came up. And then having to go to a boys' school to do a music A level, that
Yeah.
will put a lot of young women and girls off doing those type of things.
Yeah.
So it's been that. And then weird enough, the accent thing comes up a lot. I've had that a lot on gigs when, like,
No.
I've been paid to go to an event, and like they're really happy with me, the client or someone at the party. And they'll go, oh, so where are you from? And I say, oh, I'm from Liverpool. And I'll get like, oh, we'll have to watch out for you then.
Oh,
And I'm like,
I
so
love it.
basically trying to imply that I'm gonna like rob you or something. But my go-to now is always like, oh, I don't really get what you mean. Like I act stupid and I go, oh, can you explain that? Because then they can never articulate it back to me,
A
because it
nice
makes it sound so bad.
one. That's a nice one. And well done for doing that actually and making people think twice because that's not okay and that's not acceptable. I'm so sorry as well that sometimes you've had to go through some of these challenges just to be who you are and to get to where you are today. That's not okay, and it shouldn't be accepted, you know. And I'm sorry. So how's that kind of impacted you and the way you feel about yourself and being in the music industry?
It's strange because to me it's all like water off a duck's back, as my mum would say, because it's never really like bothered me, because I've always found those people to be ignorant. And I was like, the one thing I don't think I am is ignorant.
You're
And I
saying,
think that's always sort of like got me through it, because I'm like, I know I'm smart and I know I'm good at the things I do. And I know that I can help make change in a really interesting and good way with the work I do. So I've never really let these people bother me, because I'm like, I'm confident in my own ability as a person and what I can actually bring and the work I do. And I know the people who work with me like me. So it's like, I'm fine with that. So if some random person wants to have an opinion about me who I'm never going to see again,
so be it.
I don't really care, to be honest. But
Yeah.
obviously that it takes a little bit of time to get there. It's like a confidence thing. But yeah, I'm confident in my own abilities now to be able to go, okay, well, I don't really care what you think.
Love
Like
that.
I'm happy, more than happy to take criticism from the people who I should be listening to. And if someone has a criticism about my work or the way I'm phrasing things, or do they think I need to change something, I'm more than happy to have a conversation. But it's these sort of closed off comments that I'm like, that's not bringing anything
Yeah, there's
to
no need for
anyone.
it. Yeah,
So
exactly.
I have no interest.
Well done. And you know what? It takes time to get that, you know, that thick skin and to have that belief and the confidence, you know, in yourself. And how have you found that's kind of enhanced your career and your prospects in the industry?
So I think for me, it's about taking opportunities and applying for things and saying, I can do this thing or I can apply for this thing. I think I'd be perfect for that role. Because obviously there's research that says that women will only apply for something when they meet like 80 to 90% of the of like the suggested things they need, whereas men will go for 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like things like that. Whereas I look at things now and I go, what's the worst that can happen? I'll literally get rejected and my life will move on. But
Yes.
I've given it a go and I've probably learned something. And even if I've got to an interview stage, I've made people aware that I exist and
Yeah.
they may think of me for something in the future. And that's happened. I've been rejected for a few things, but it's always come back in the future and they've remembered me for something and maybe suggested me for some work or then hired me for another project they're working on. So I think for me, it's about giving opportunities a chance and just giving things a go. And even if you fail miserably, you've got to, because then you'll have learned something and you'll know what you're not good at.
Also look at it as a positive as well, because every time you fail, you learn something out of that failure. And failure is part of success. And not a lot of people talk about that either.
Yeah.
Is that the successful people have had so many failures, but they just don't give up. They keep trying. They have that consistency and they learn from all of those mistakes and all of those issues that have happened in the past. Have you done the same?
Yeah, I've literally had about 3 or 4 flop eras in the past like 4 years. Like just before I started my PhD, I was like unemployed. I didn't have any work coming in. I was dead stressed. I was like, what am I going to do? Am I going to have to get like a normal job to like try and fund things? And then I just applied for the PhD and I got a full scholarship ride to do it. And then I sort of got involved in projects and then I created GENIE using investment from SoundCloud and it all sort of snowballed. And it's like, it is a confidence thing because when you do get knocked down, you're like, oh God, I'm never going to get back from this. But I think if you work in the music industry, you start to realize that you're constantly going to be like this, especially if you're self-employed.
Yes.
Like self-employment is cruel sometimes, but it's also really good. There are many benefits to it. But I think for me, I've had to just learn to give in to the uncertainty a little bit and
Yes.
be thinking 10 steps ahead at the same time.
Well, you've got to, haven't you? You've always got to have your hat on and think about where you're going and what you're doing. I think
Yeah.
that's really important. And what are your thoughts and feelings at the moment around equality, diversity, and inclusion in the music industry?
So like I said, yeah, I think we're doing better and there's some great projects that are going on. But my problem is a lot of the like with GENIE is obviously projects that support with gender equality. A lot
Yeah.
of them are absolutely brilliant, but they're underfunded and don't have the resources to sort of really have the impact they need. And that's not the fault of the people running them, because a lot of these people are giving up their free time and sort of their space and their knowledge for free to sort of support other women in the industry. And I think the responsibility needs to be put back on bigger companies to fund these adventures in a way and
Fair,
sort of
100%.
put money into them, because you're gonna get something back from it when the talent comes out of it, because they have a clear like what's it like, they obviously create talent, because I've seen people come out of these programs, like producer
Yeah,
courses, do really well and
yes.
stuff. So I think that's my biggest gripe with the industry at the moment, is all these projects that are supporting women are really underfunded and undersupported.
Yes, and I don't think we've got much of an intersectional approach on that either. We look at it as male or female,
Definitely.
but then we're not really looking at the intersectional stuff that goes in between that and that divides a lot of people, whether it be men or women.
Yeah, definitely. I think intersectionality it's getting better, but I think it's, especially if you move outside of London, it can definitely be a lot more difficult. Because I think London is a lot more diverse in that respect. Whereas
100%.
you move outside and there seems to still be this very white, very Eurocentric, very like cis female.
Yeah.
This is the projects that we support, and I think there definitely needs to be this reconfiguration of that as well, and sort of looking at that and going, how can we include these communities who have traditionally been marginalised and may not have the confidence to apply for these things, or may not think it's for them.
Yeah, 100%. Because I think we're losing talent all the time. If we're not supporting the talent where it should be, we're losing it and it's going elsewhere. So what kind of things would you like to see change in the next couple of years around equality, diversity, and inclusion?
So definitely better funding models for projects and project leaders to be able to run their projects. Probably more link ups with major companies with
Yes.
a sort of talent development programs, but not ones that are just like, we're doing an event for International Women's Day. It's like, no, this needs to be like baked into your company policy and your HR, that
Oh,
you are working with these people and you are actively trying to work with people in communities that you haven't reached before.
yeah.
And I think also reaching out to talent outside of London, that's a big one for me, is how can you work with the people who are already rooted in their communities? Because it's like, well, if you're an A&R and you're only based in London and you just spend your time on either in London or on the internet looking for things, wouldn't it
Yes.
be better to have people rooted in those scenes already, who
100%.
were on your payroll and can tell you what's going on? And like, this artist has only put out one song that has 500 streams, but we think she could be the next big thing. Why don't you come and have a listen to her?
I think that's really important actually, because I moved from Oxford to London to pursue my dream actually of being in the music industry. I knew the music industry wasn't in Oxford, and Oxford's very student centric and it's
Yeah.
great to be. It's a very diverse place, full of education, and it's a lovely place. But however, there was nothing around music education, nothing around the music industry, nothing around really around creativity. It's very much mundane kind of, structures and courses that you could do that was around where we lived rather than
Yeah.
what we really wanted to do. So I had to move from Oxford to London to be, in the place where it was. And do you think that that has a impact on the success that you can have in the music industry as well?
I think particularly at the moment, because like I think London's insane at the moment, because I go down for work and things, but I obviously live in Liverpool, and
Yeah,
my friends who live there, the price of rent and the conditions that people are having to live in,
it's awful.
this is just obscene, quite frankly. What I've seen, like some of the stuff I've seen of like what is getting put online as a rented accommodation, I'm like, that is not fit for habitation. And like, when you get into your 30s and stuff, do you want to be living with 16 other people? And
Exactly.
that is, it's like, this is the situation we're putting people in. And then it's like, well, how are they ever going to have a work-life balance if their life is this one room in a flat? So I think that's my big problem, is the cost of living, especially in London. Like, it obviously affects people in Liverpool and other places, but I think if people move to London, it's hard to set yourself up for success at this point. It's not like it used to be, where you could probably move down and sort of struggle along and get through. It feels like you need money to be able to pursue the type of career you want there at the moment, and there isn't that work-life balance. Like, you're not going to be able to afford property in London unless you're on an amazing salary.
But my
You're not
drive,
going to be able to have your friends round.
I can't even
You
afford
can't
to drive
drive.
anymore. Yeah, I can't
Yeah,
afford it.
literally, there's like, it's all these silly things that you don't think of. Whereas like me in Liverpool, I'm
Yeah.
on track to like have money to buy a house in the future and move out, and silly things like that. It's like, this may not seem connected to my job in the music industry,
Yeah.
but it's this work-life balance thing. And it's like, this wouldn't be possible for me in London, paying
Right.
like 80% of my salary out to
And
a,
basically,
a, a corporate landlord for
yeah,
somewhere that probably isn't the type of house I'd probably like to live in.
yeah.
So I think these are some of the things that come up. It's like I said, all of it is wider political and societal issues that then impact on the people in creative industries who are traditionally quite underpaid and in quite insecure work conditions anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that also affects kind of people's progression, but also their mental health as well. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Massive impact on that. So do you think that cultural differences and age differences have a massive impact to play in the way and how much we can achieve inequality, diversity, and inclusion at the moment in the music industry?
I think definitely, because I think there's still this the sort of the gender divide's there, but the age divide is an interesting one, because when I speak to older people,
Yeah.
and it depends where they're getting the news from and stuff, and they're taking headlines about the concept of woke, and I'm like, woke just simply means not being racist or homophobic and stuff. It's not that deep. It's like, you just don't be a dick. That's all you're trying to do. So I think it's definitely that. So even when I speak to people that I do like gender equality work, sometimes it gets a bit of an eye roll, and I'm like, and I've had people go, why do we really need any of that stuff now? Don't women sort of have equality? And I'm like,
I've heard
well,
that.
it's easy for you to say that, like you're a man who's worked in this industry
Quite
for
man
40
generally.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're probably in the top like 20% of salaries in this company. It's like, well, yeah, of course, you've never had to think about it. So I think there's definitely still that age divide thing, and I think there's still a bit of an issue between women in age divides, like older women who have maybe fought for their position and
Yes.
then feel a bit nervous to invite other women into the space because they've had to fight so hard for their one space.
Yeah.
And it's not like the space is expanding. The space is staying the same, but with the one woman in it. So
Yeah.
bringing in women may feel like a threat to your career. And it's like, I get it. Do you get what I mean? I've seen it in action with women acting like that. And it's like, but you can see from a societal perspective how it's got to that stage. And it's like, men are competing in a very different way than women are for roles.
Yeah. 100%. I think that's so true what you're saying, actually. And it's also understanding about, sometimes they call it the queen bee phenomenon, don't they? Like,
Yeah, that's exactly what it's called.
yes, I remember someone sending me some research on this, actually, and I found it really, really interesting. So if you looked at your research and the stuff you've done so far, what are the biggest disparities that you're finding at the moment, especially with doing Genie and putting everything into a database? So let's talk a little bit more about Genie, what it is and how it can help other people in the industry.
So it's actually just an online, it's like a website you can go to, and it just features every single project I've found so far, which is supporting with equality and diversity in music at this moment, really focusing on gender. So
Yeah.
things like producer courses, collectives, online workshops, and like Facebook groups, online forums for people to just get involved with. So that's basically where I set it up. And you can search it by project type. There's like a tag system or country. And for me, it was just a way of making people connect a little bit more, because there's so much interest in gender equality work going on and a lot of crossover, but people don't
Yes.
seem to talk to each other. And
Right.
I'm like, you need to start communicating, because best practice in and is so worth talking about.
Yeah, 100%. And it's the first place that I actually know that you can look in one place to find everyone in one specific area, which is, well, not in one specific area, one place that's from all the different areas in the music industry, which I find really fantastic and inspirational. I think we need more of that. So well done for doing that. What would you like to see, you know, in the next couple of years from the work that you've done? What is the impact? What is it you're hoping to achieve from doing this database?
So I think Genie, I wanted to keep building because it's sort of built on community, so people can upload their own projects to the database, because I started it with 300 odd, and then
Yeah.
since I launched I've had like 70 or 80 projects added, which is really good. So for me, it's that community aspect of it, and sort of seeing how can I advocate for the people who are running these projects now, because I feel like this is a community that's been underserviced, because we're doing loads for the people who are getting involved in the projects, but what about the people who are running them and doing that on the ground day-to-day slog of getting more women into industry and creating communities for them? So I think for me, it's maybe getting more funding to do a report around that, some academic research, and then also launching like maybe a Genie US.
Wow.
I've started to collect data on it, because it's a model that can be applied anywhere really, and I think the US for me seems to be the next viable and
Yeah.
sort of the place that makes sense for me to sort of expand this to, because there's a lot of interesting stuff going on over there, but they've also got an incredibly strange and horrific political situation
I was going
that
to say
is
that, actually,
not
yeah.
good for the rights of women at the moment.
Yeah.
So
And how do you find that? Like, because you work in the UK, you work in Europe, and you might possibly be working in the States. What are those massive differences that you see at the moment around gender equality and diversity?
well, I think it's the more general thing, the rise of the right wing and populism in every country. It seems we're moving the dial backwards from where we are from progressive movements, and it's like the fact that we're in this insane situation where it's like, could Donald Trump win another presidency? to me. It's like from sitting from a UK perspective, I'm like, this is wild when this man literally caused an insurrection.
Tell me about
So
it.
yeah, it's just all of these things I find so wild. And yeah, I think the way it's that wider impact on women that then affects the careers they can even consider. Like if a woman can't get access to contraception or abortion, healthcare,
Or even childcare, even.
or childcare, any of these things, then of course that's going to impact on the career she might have, no matter what industry. And then taking it into an industry where women have traditionally been marginalized anyway,
Yes,
it's that double-edged sword as well. So
isn't
I
it?
think, yeah, I think for me it's the worrying rise of the right wing and populism. I think that we're seeing is the biggest threat to the work I do and to the progress we could and have made so far.
Society as a whole, actually, I think it impacts everybody in the way everyone feels and thinks, you know, and even the way we see ourselves. I think it's a massive a dent in the way people see us and treat us, actually, and it's sad. And I'm so sorry as well that you've also had to go through some of these issues yourself. So how has discrimination affected you in the music industry, and how's it impacted your career?
To be honest, I think I've been incredibly lucky, which is horrific to say, that I haven't really had any major issues or problems. I've worked with a lot of people who've had a lot of very horrific situations they've been in. Mine's been more the offhand comments that haven't really affected my day-to-day life, but I've not really been blocked from my career progression and all things like that. I've not had any sort of really horrific situations happen to me, which it's depressing that I have to even caveat that, but that puts me in a very privileged position in this industry. So yeah, it's more seeing the experiences of others that have sort of affected me more, to be honest, and hearing, God, this is actually happening, because I'm a white woman. I'm from quite a comfortable background. It's like I'm quite closeted in that respect. No, like I've
Yeah,
not really had the hardship that others have had with those
yeah,
intersections as well. So
I,
I've been incredibly lucky. So it's then about me educating myself on
yeah,
all the things that can go wrong and have gone wrong societally and historically for women. And
yeah.
then how can I counteract that with my work?
That's amazing. I wish there was more people like you, Grace, in the world. God, wouldn't it be nice? Before we go, because we've literally got 5 minutes left of the show. So thank you again for coming along. Is there any major wins or successes that you'd like to share with us? And also your handles if anyone wants to get in touch or find out more
Yes.
about the work that GENIE is doing.
So GENIE is on Instagram at GENIE Database, and it's also www.geniedatabase.com. And you can get in touch, find projects. And if you know of a project that we don't have, there's a form on the website where you can add a project as well. So I'm always very keen to get more people to do that. And I've got some really fun travels coming up. Like I'm going to Copenhagen in
Oh,
September,
yeah.
which I'm really excited for, to support. There's a program called Tracks By, which is for producers based in Denmark, and I'm going to be going over to talk about GENIE and all the work I've been doing with that. And next week I'm actually presenting at a conference in Newcastle, sort of
So,
looking at work around GENIE and gender equality projects in general and how they affect career progression in the music industry. So yeah, I'm a bit all over the place with my work at the moment, but in a really, really lovely way as well.
good, fantastic. And if anyone wants to connect with you or find out more, have you got any details that they can connect with you? Any Instagram, any Facebook or LinkedIn profiles?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's probably the best. I'm just like Grace Goodwin. You'll be able to find me because of GENIE on that. And then my email is gracegood14@yahoo.co.uk. Very old school email. If anyone wants to get in touch with me about anything and chat about my work or chat about your work, because I'm always wanting to meet new people who are offering a different perspective than me from my work, because I find it's so interesting to hear about how someone might approach the problem differently and then
Yes.
learn from them, or they can learn from me. So I'm very open to that as well.
Collaborations, they're great. Thank you again so much for coming along, sharing your story, your vision, and your expertise with us. And I hope to see you again soon. Keep up the
Oh,
amazing work.
thank you so much.
Thanks, Grace. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.